究竟你对那帮我刮巴了，你结果下巴的程度啊？他结果下巴的那样，我西域边呢，他不推荐帮我米里边军战，些，他那样，你推荐帮我米里就那了，推荐了没比年没当，他那当我米里吧，他推荐了没比年没得了，顺切干了，推荐了没比出，他对应的，
So next comes the negation of abandonment of the scriptures of the Mahayana. This has two parts, an extensive explanation and a summary. The extensive explanation has four parts, the first of which is the reason why it's inappropriate, it's wrong to abandon, to cast aside the scriptures of the Mahayana. And then that in turn has two subdivisions, the faults, the negative consequences that arise from condemning the Mahayana, and the reason why it is inappropriate to be angry because of that, those negative consequences that arise from condemning the Mahayana. So first comes the negative consequences that arise from condemning the Mahayana, and first of those is the way in which some persons condemn the Mahayana.
Oh yeah, that teaching la maybe true de. Teaching shebe teaching le changju sembi cho den na. Tela kundu mo wa na rabdo dan me ba ches. Ani teaching shebe ani zhen den de yi tiba chimbi de ne ge ga su. Ani san je yu kong ban ru ba de chebi. Changju sembi so nam ji cho dan, yi xi ji cho ni ge ba den na. Ani tiba chimbi lamden zoba telas. O xi denba ni lam tapxi dewu tu chesu. O deni chesu gugu lamden zoba tela kundu mombi nyande dewa nambar. Rabdu tanga meba chedo se gana tela kundu momba na ani rabdu tanga meba che.
So this verse is 67 in this translation. I'm changing the word deride into condemn. The Tathagatas taught the Bodhisattva's collections in the Mahayana, but it is condemned by those who are confused and hateful. The explanation of this is that the scriptures of the Mahayana, which were taught by the Tathagata, the Tathagata, when he extensively explains, has extensively taught the two collections here. This is referring to the collection of merit and the collection of gnosis for the bodhisattvas in those scriptures of the Mahayana. Some persons who belong to the Shravaka tradition, to some of the different schools of the Shravaka tradition, are completely confused by this because of the extensive way in which within the Mahayana the path and its results are taught in their entirety. So this refers to within the Mahayana the two realities are taught as a foundation and then as the basis, and then the path consists of the practice of the six perfections and so forth, and then in the terms of the result, when one practices Mahayana, one actualizes the two embodiments of Buddhahood, the physical embodiments as well as the Dharmakaya. And therefore, these people that, some of these members of some of the Shravaka traditions, when they hear this, they're completely, totally confused by this, and then they get furious and they condemn it.
Oh yeah. This one.
Please.
Oh, that didn't teaching a maybe good day. Touching the teaching a maybe true teacher. That teaching a maybe you have a good career, Sena. Teaching a maybe Juni, maybe Juni did I in there. You then join the Meshebam, 原点卷都写吧，这个呢，长久生比原点，俺的长久生吧，让给原点开始来是呢，俺的让点办的让给团当的，俺的让给团写吧的判的呢，那当年先决定把西后切后联吧给原点堂，是吧？你让点把西后联行。你后联吧吧，让点把西执行，先了那边给俺那卷到没写吧，原点卷到没写吧，是这样。
So then the next verse gives the reasons why these people condemn the Mahayana. It says, those who condemn the Mahayana either cannot distinguish good qualities from faults, or they mistake good qualities for faults, or else they hate good qualities. And the first of these is not being able to understand the difference between good qualities and faults. So this is explained in the commentary that the bodhisattvas, they completely cast aside their own objectives, and they strictly, solely apply themselves, strive to accomplish the aims of others. And so because of that, people who don't understand the difference between those they fall into this condemnation of Mahayana.
yeah. 야나原点卷都写吧，谁讲了？原点了，俺那卷都大的，卷都怎么卷都写吧。야나特别前边原点了，当我是。俺那特别清楚了，每一个厂就是没得谁干了。现在看什么叫他说话，让点当呢，先决定把西后联比原点当，让点路径后联行，现在那边见到没写吧，见都写吧。俺那对了，俺那看说，让那原点了当我提什么提，有什么提了，先没被吃了。
So then this first category again, it's the people that are not able to understand good qualities and faults to distinguish them. This again is referring to the bodhisattva who gives up their own aims and they strive solely for the aims of others, those good qualities. And then on the other hand, the faulty sort of behavior of only being interested in one's own aims, solely striving to accomplish one's own aims, and even engaging in harm to others, that kind of good quality. So some people are in that category. That's the first of three categories. Then there's another category, the second one, which is those who misconceive or misapprehend good qualities as faults. And then there's a third category, which is that some people are simply have animosity towards good qualities, here referring to the good qualities of the Mahayana itself. So in one of those three ways, there's three ways in which persons come to condemn the Mahayana out of those three reasons, and there are no other reasons other than that.
顺不轻松啊？呀，他提前了没把元旦了当我期待一些呢？现在你把卷当你现在偏把元旦都现在提把钱包了，没去元旦当些家，是现在你把卷当你现在你把卷当，俺那现在偏把元旦都现在提把钱了，没把钱包了。提把全部给俺那现在你把这了卷当，现在偏把这了元旦都现年，现在给提把全部这了，没把钱把元旦了当时决定的，现在你把卷当你现在偏把元旦都是啊，决定的提把全部年呢，俺那看的是我的是那先去卷过把当，俺那就怕着被卷过把当。元旦这边他用是做我登记，你天面给的那啦， 아니 텐데기 현지 교육 거보다 연된 뒤에 차점 내년에 차점에 맞대 며칠 쓰리가나 현라 편바 연된도 현에 뒤바 전부라 나 매제 연된 당시 저
Yes. So then the next verse explains further this, 69. What harms others are faults, what helps them are good qualities. Recognizing this, it is said that those who condemn the Mahayana hate good qualities. So here it's understood that harming others is faulty and that benefiting others is a good quality. And therefore, those who condemn the Mahayana, it's appropriate to say that they hate good qualities. They have animosity or hatred towards good qualities. And the reason for this is that in the scriptures of the Mahayana, then it explains how one can stop the faults of others, and likewise the methods by which one can accomplish good qualities are completely explained. That is, they're explained in their entirety, whereas in the scriptures of the lesser vehicle, the Hinayana, they're not. These methods are not taught. Except for a portion, except in a partial kind of fashion.
다 대받침보라 매비 예미 되라. 아니 랑그탄라 메다지 현대로지 가와다. 연된 중에 특전데 텔라 단에 습바 주루 세가나 랑그탄라 메다지 세레 자사 창주 선바 되다. 아니 랑그탄라 메다와. 메다위 메다위 7세 랑데 미시베 티 아니 현전라 로직도 가와 차와 현전라 로직도 가와 가와 칸인베 아니 연된지 주네 자사 창주 선바 연된지 주네지 아니 자사 창주 선비 냠수 랑자 아니 냠수 랑자 조바 특전데 세워데자 연된 중에 특전대 현대 로지 가와가 연된 중에 특전대 텐더위 티바 첨보라 다음 특전범 특전란 당와티 당와보라니 아니 티바 첨보라 몇발라 때네 매비 예외 라니 안로스버 추대 아니 디바 푸드 중화사 특전범 티바 첨보라 매비 아니 디바 빠도면봐 푸드 중화사 치로
Then next verse shows the negative consequences of condemning the Mahayana. And this is verse 70. By being unconcerned about one's own aims, one takes delight uniquely in the aims of others. This source of all good qualities is the teaching of the Mahayana. Hence, one who hates it is tormented, or it actually literally means burned, in negative rebirths. So this is explained that a bodhisattva doesn't look to his or her own aims and is solely takes delight only in the aims of others. That is, they're completely absorbed in accomplishing the aims of others. And so since that is the source of all of whatever good qualities exist, then someone who gets angry at and hates this Mahayana, the Mahayana here being the complete practice, that is the entirety of what a bodhisattva is supposed to take up in practice, someone who hates that causes himself or herself, that is the person who has that hatred, to go into the lower states of existence and to be burned there. And the reason that is the case is because they have accumulated the highest form of sin.
Oh yeah. 다디니 대바전이 손예배 주세 당지 최와이 대바전야 세션나 다외 치조 매주 거 다 동반이开了吧 동반이라 대바쟁 아니 동반이 조주 미셰바 동반이 그 군대 매비텐도 거네 연하를 하시지 여고 아니 때는 매바지 인데 가서 군대 매비텐도 거네 되게 아니 동반이 가서래 돈이라 대바쟁 동반이 그된 지다 좀 매셰베 아니 돈이 그텐데 군대 매비텐도 거와다 양 동반이 요 말에 제가 동반이라 친지로도 당와就是亲동반이라 당위지 최와 이세요 다다디 대바쟁이 손예베 세 돈이 보와 많이 봐 돈이 더 친지로도 그게 군대 매비텐도 공개되지就是당지를 세가 동반이라 당외 동반이 요 말에 전에 구화된 게 돈이 bomba 쳐봐 니래 니래 랜데 여바 메바 아니 동반이 그 대군대 매비텐도 거네 랜데 여바 매바 거기 돈이 라 대바 쟁양 텐자양 랜데 동반이 그 텐데 아니 군대 매바 아니 랜데 매비텐도 거와 인장 랜데 매바 따와 인장 되게 따위 대부대라 안도 쓰바르 벌레잖아 와 대바쟁야 쓰준 아니 쓰잖아 야
Then next verse says, but even a faithful person is tormented due to misunderstanding it. Someone else who is angry is tormented due to his hatred. It is said that even the faithful, if it is said that even the faithful person is tormented, then actually tormented is better translated as burned, but it's an alternative translation. What about the one who turns away due to hatred? I've changed the last two words there. What about the one who turns away due to hatred? So this says, then the commentary explains this, that someone who has some faith in emptiness, but they misapprehend it. That is, they understand emptiness in a faulty fashion, and they understand it such that they believe that if something exists, it necessarily must exist by means of its own intrinsic nature. And since emptiness demonstrates that things do not exist by means of their own intrinsic nature, then they come to think that necessarily entails that one cannot establish cause and effect in any way whatsoever. There's no way to establish causality. So that's one faulty sort of misunderstanding. Even though someone likes emptiness or has faith in it, misunderstanding it as if it entailed the non-existence of causality is one case of someone who has misunderstood emptiness. And then there's another case of people who simply are angry, have animosity towards emptiness. Then out of that hatred, due to their hatred, they abandon or cast away emptiness. And there's sort of these two alternatives here. Then out of those two alternatives, with respect to someone who has faith in emptiness, some kind of belief in it, but understands it as if it entailed that there was no such thing as karma and its results, then such a person is burned in the lower realms of existence. And that's explained in the sutras. So therefore, since that's the case, therefore, if someone has hatred towards emptiness, that is, they become opponents to the meaning of the perfection of wisdom, out of hating emptiness. Then what needs to be said about them being burned? It's definitely the case that they would be burned, and therefore. Meba metu ziniang, Tony Gitun Kur Dapa Michao.
그래서
Meba metu ziniang.
내가 단대 데려와 대바전이 소녀 봐 주시에 당지 최와이 대바전 색선나세라 돈이라 대바전 아니 돈이 대바연나야 돈이 조당 매세 봐 아니 돈이 그디 군대에 bet은도 고와 고소
교수
대지서
교수
네
아니
다 지나 뒤된다디 니 예배 나니 랜데 여바메 봐 코비 돈이라 대바전양 대바연게데 돈이 아니 안으로 습관 돌에现那是吧다 되니 다음에 제조 매주고 세가 동반이 뽕데 돈이 매봤다呗다음에 동반이 싫어지 바로지 신비 된라 칠초와데 아니 돈이 또 비롬 동반이다 돈이 또 비셔지 바로를 신반 매봤다와데로 칠초와 아니 가소래 안지 농아지 쓰바 매주거데 내가 쓰베 아니 쓰베 괜찮 뒤체나 돈이라 매와 매도 쓰나양 동반이 되라 고왔다브라 미샤 근데 미샤 매바 마다 고왔다 미샤
So since it says that if it's the case that someone who misunderstands emptiness and thinks of it as if it entailed the non-existence of causality, and specifically the causality of karma and the effects of karma, then if such a person, it's said in the sutras, will burn in the lower realms of existence by means of that wrong view, even though they have some admiration for emptiness, then what needs to be said about someone who hates emptiness, and out of that hatred that they have for it, then they become the opponent of emptiness, that is the meaning of the perfection of wisdom. One hardly needs to mention that they would be burned in the same way. And then since it's definitely the case that they would be burned in that way, then even if one doesn't have any admiration for emptiness, one doesn't have interest in it, or any kind of interest in emptiness, then it's important that one should not disparage or one should not deprecate the meaning of emptiness. One should not engage in deprecation of the meaning of emptiness.
다 되니다. subject 니와 되라. 되나? 아니 당와 미르바. 당와 미르바데 특별히 몰라. 당와 미르바데라. 이베 나네. 동아 충의 아니 충의자 전부 사 미르바 사 미르바라서 아유베 나네 다 담보 동아 충의자 전부 사 가사 리바니 나와 미르바 동아 침배장 아니 대라 아유베나 동아 충의자 전부 사 리바 네 셰체
So next comes the reason. There are multiple reasons, 5 given, for why it's inappropriate to get angry, to hate emptiness, as mentioned above. And the first of these is that it's appropriate. The reasons given here are, the first of this is that by means of even a small amount of suffering, one can eliminate, or it's appropriate to eliminate a large form of suffering by means of a small amount of suffering. This is the first of these 5.
다 담보 동아 충의 첨부 사와르바니 카지디게도 특바 첨부라 당와르데 아니 특바 첨부기 고동알라서 까지 첨부 미세비체당 준에 샤바게 아니 고다 갈라 지바 동알라 소와게 아니 까지 첨부 미세비체당 아니 사모 동바니 또바 까비 칠 특바 첨부 아니 양수련바라다 돈이 내가 배우고 와서 사모 동바니 또바 까비 칠잖아
So then this first reasoning is given showing how one can alleviate a large amount of suffering by a small amount of suffering. Now, some people would have said, it's appropriate to hate the Mahayana because because the practices that one finds there, that is the extreme austerities of giving away one's head, giving away the limbs of one's body, and so forth. These large austerities are very difficult or unbearable, in fact. And then the other reason they give is that this profound the profound emptiness is difficult to understand.
Oh, that dila. Tugi sachawa chita manja leshe shin. Oh, said chala naza geg tu. Chala naza gewaki tugi ane tude seve chivi dunga gewaki ane tude sawar chawa. Imbade sawa chawa chita menji shunla manja la shaba shinto menji shunla shaba ti shinto. Seyo Tugi sachawa chita manja leshe shin. Yeah.
So then the explanation of this is given in the verse 72, where it says that physicians say that poison may be eliminated with poison, the first two lines. And it's explained that although there's certain kinds of poisonous substances which will produce some kind of temporary sickness within one, but this kind of poisonous substance is that which is employed to remove or to heal one of a poison which is generating a suffering that would result in one's own death, a fatal form of suffering. And this is how it's explained in medical treatises.
No, menjala shaba tishindu dunga chejang mebamba sawa shawa jishi chas. Tsedi chungi dunga chejang ane mao bagi mebamba chenpo rara mebamba mo neba chenpo che ane sawa jibala jishi ka.
Then the end of the verse says, so how is it contradictory to say that how is it contradictory to say that suffering may eliminate something unhelpful? How is it? Yeah, that's exactly right. So then it says. So then the commentary explains this, saying then also. How is it contradictory then to utilize some sort of small suffering that occurs to you in this current life in order to alleviate or remove something which would provide some kind of large problem for you or major suffering for you in the future? It's not contradictory. It's the only rational thing to do.
Oh yeah, didang jenju gasu seje mishi la jade kade thana jimale. Kade mi dungaji 야 아니 가서 야와 차나 jimale. 대 지바 지장이 말을. 봐. 아니 속이 잡아 jongen 게 미직 아니 속이 잡아 주묘가 라바 잡아듯이나 아니 가그를 만도 아니 누구 말에 속이 잡아라 줘대 라바 잡아게 잡아대게 속이 잡아라 줘와 인장 안돼 리바 가그를 만도 되라 누구 말에 와 사실 미시 라자데 가데 타나 지메게 가데 미 동아지 냐와 타나 지메네 시스 미 내가서 냐원 로조기 동아 탑첨보지 쏴야기 레지기 남민지 대부대 체디 미iten라 동아 첨보지기 냐이나야 되게 냐위 동아 안에 차고 와 냐위 동아 그봐 하고서 냐와 타나 지말에 세자다 dinyi jiba chi yang
So the same ideas are expressed in the introduction to the Bodhisattva's way of life, where it says that if someone who has a sentence of capital punishment hanging over them, that is, they're going to be executed. And if that sentence is then commuted to the amputation of a limb, they'll actually take delight in that. They'll be so happy to find out that instead of being executed, they're only going to lose a limb. This will be something that will actually produce joy for them. They'll have pleasure in this. And then that example illustrates how one should view having to undergo some kind of suffering within the human state of existence. So if that suffering as a human will enable you to purify yourself or to remove the cause that would give rise to an intense and long duration or a much worse kind of suffering that you'd have to experience in the lower realms of existence. So that example applies exactly to the same situation, that it's much better to have some kind of relatively minor suffering here in the human realm as a human being than to have to undergo an intense suffering of great duration in one of the lower realms of existence.
Oh yeah. That didn't teaching you jobala, and jobala, teaching you jobala. Lunga Junsa Yuan, Denji Dunga, Seji, Tela Dawa Mirubani, Denji Dunga, Sawa Chaba, but Tela Dawa Mirubani, Dunga Junsa Yuan, Denji Dunga, Seji, but Tela Dawa Mirubade. Che Dungaji Duyan, Church Gaja in that church tend to Kawajaba. Church Gaja Dungaji Duyan, Dawa Miride. Dunga Church Gaja, Dunga Junsa.
So next comes showing that although it is the case that there's some suffering when one practices the Mahayana, however, because it's inappropriate to get angry at that, because this is in fact that which eliminates the ultimate forms of suffering or ultimate forms of suffering. So this is in reference then to different kinds of difficult practices, things that are difficult to endure in terms of the practice, such as giving away parts of your body or so forth. But because there is some suffering, some relatively minor suffering involved with that, one should, but if one recognizes that this functions as a means to eliminate the ultimate forms of suffering, then one shouldn't, it's inappropriate to get angry at that.
Oh yeah, that didn't Pamba Jason Ruby Cities. And it Junja Carres and a channel one new Yidrosing. Yin is always Shedaba. 做协查吧，是干，一个月过年浪的，一个月过年浪的，另外个，安尼一个娃是那过龙，安尼个月过年浪上那，瞧我看到个，另外个来看的是那样，过龙个月过年浪那，另外个来给我的就行，给我的就，全那滚都一桌行是干了，安尼看说的，去他们个月来他们家去。 我安尼滚浪着个，天哪呢？长久个身份，安尼，讲说嘞，长久身份个另外个来，在那个那安尼现了偏半对比，安尼讲说嘞，哦，偏对个300个，安尼全我都着个吧，全那滚都一着性，哦，一着性，特别前边安尼。 가서 되네래 특별 친빈 되네래 이니 조 시차바 세가나 어시안라 팬더기 삼바 현변지 삼바 어현변지 팜 현변지 삼바디 조 시차베 장주 선배 가제지 동아 기장 다 현지도 가제지 동아 제바 되기 현라 팬바 이 가서 현라 팬반 되바 一级偏把切吧，几米偏把 ji mi ben ba chu de pen ba ju gu de se de la dong a ji jin ji jiang pen yi ji pen ba che ba ji mi ben.
So then next is explained that although Dharma practice, even if it is a cause of suffering, this is again referring to the difficult practices that bodhisattvas undergo, giving away portions of their body or and so forth. These things can be a source of suffering. However, it's not something that is appropriate to get angry at, because although by means of these relatively minor forms of suffering, one is able to accomplish a vast benefit for others. And this is explained in verse 73. The scriptures maintain that the mind is the prerequisite for all dharmas, or I would say maybe that mind precedes all dharmas. The mind is the principal factor in actions. So if one does something helpful with the intention to be helpful, how could it be unhelpful even if suffering is involved? And the commentary explains this, that if your mind is in a virtuous state, and this is referring here specifically to the attitude of wishing to benefit others. So if you have that kind of motivation, a virtuous mind, which is the wish to benefit others, then all of your actions of your physical and verbal actions, the actions of your body and mind, will be virtuous. And then since mind precedes all dharmas, this here dharmas could be read as referring to all phenomena, or one could read it as referring to practices, dharma practices here. Then where it says in the Mahayana Sutras that mind is chief, here this is again mind here is referring to the beneficial attitude, the attitude of wishing to benefit other sentient beings. That is chief, it's renowned in that way. That is, mind is, this beneficial mind is the principal practice or principal thing. It's renowned that way. Therefore, the bodhisattva's difficult practices, the suffering that arises from those difficult practices of the bodhisattva, these are done out of the wish to benefit others. And in that way, since that the mind is in that way, how could they possibly not be beneficial? And the conclusion is that they are in fact beneficial.
Oh yeah. 가서 가져지 동아 지자 현라 편반 더비 아니 이지 편바 차와데 지미변의 편바 주그래 주가 그래서나 미대양 치제 편주와 천난 다다 현다라 대변다시 지미의 최대나이 루인 요노세 어디기다 가르쳐 그래서나 미대양 치제에서 제수 판발이 주와 다 가서 다세 다그 저기 따라와당 리스바당 아니 샤발라 소와 라바 따라와당 스발라 소와 미대와양 안다 류라 텐데 아니 미대양 치수 안에 대다서 대 샤발라 때네 아니 나자 팬데 치 제수 판바 차와라나 판바주바 차리나 나당 현다라 대화당 판바 자체본 주추위 미대한 치제 편주나 천난 다당 현다라 서 다당 현다라 대화당 판바 자체비 주추위 다디 동아 중산 냠수 렘바 아니 냠수 레리바 다시 메데
Then the next verse gives an example and of why this is the case. This is 74. If one should do something unpleasant that will be later be helpful, then what about doing something for oneself and others that is both pleasant and helpful? Here, I'm not sure if that translation fits this exactly. Here it says that in the commentary that in the case of medical treatment, you might have to undergo things such as bleeding and cauterization, and that these will give some discomfort to you right now. These will be unpleasant for your body at the present. However, it's appropriate to do these because it'll provide a great benefit to you subsequently. And since it is appropriate to do things like that, then isn't it appropriate to take up in practice, actually, a certain amount of suffering right now in the present, which will serve as the cause for vast happiness and benefit to both oneself and others. Of course, that is the case.
Oh, yeah. 나다 현다라 평바 자체비 줄주위 아니 다디 동아 중세 냠술렘바 르바 따지 메데 최디 뒤숨지 산제지 내누레 세다디 르바디 최디 아니 뒤숨지 산제 탐제기 아니 루소 내누레 야나 삼비 루인
This
최디 나이 루인노 세야지
This dharma is the naluk ya naluk. Di tsawa
나와 여기 최대 나이 루인노 세가라 삼비 루 제지다 야나 아니 뒤숨지 산제기 내루레 그봐 뒤숨지 산제기 아니 루소레 세제 내루 동반이라 맞아체.
So this dharma then is the tradition, one could say, the tradition of the Buddhas of the three times, or one can also say that this is the right kind of practice, the right way to practice.
아줌바 대화 준비된도 배르지 충을라 대화 충을라 잡아 메르바 어데라 가데 대중 용한다베 대진 대화 자신 통주나 대변 대화 중세라 대화 충우 땅와 저 세대다 가데 대화 충우 바 땅니 대화 자신 보지 통원주나 라라 아니 대화 충우 용하데 바 땅니 대래 하바기 대화 자신 보지 충화데 통화주나 장주 셈바 로덴베 대화 방신 시스템 베나다 라라잖아 라라 대화 충우 용화데 충우데 용화데 파 땅니 대래신 아니 현라 편비 대화 자신 보지 통화주나 아니 장주 셈바 로덴베 랑기 대화데 빠신 자치와 라다 현지 규라 탑이 대화 중화 세라对嘞 가데 대중 용다바 대화 자신 통주나 땜베 대화 중세라
Then verse 75 says, if one will later attain great happiness for forsaking some trifling pleasure now, then a sensible person, or actually it reads a person, a steadfast person, realizing that she or he will gain great happiness. Then these first three lines are explained in the commentary. If by forsaking or giving up some small happiness, one is able to see that one will achieve a vast happiness in that way, then in that way, the bodhisattva who has a firm mind here, or is steadfast, firm mind literally, and who abandons his or her own happiness, and then out of that, in that way, is able to see that doing that will enable them to give rise to a vast amount of happiness and a vast amount of happiness. They were punching Gyachewa
대화 자첨부 통화 주나 통나 대화 자첨부지 통나 대화 충고 단계 대화 자첨부지 통화 주나 그러와 랑게 대화 충고지 반에 되네 신 안에 랑시아라 편박이 대화 자첨부지 통화 주나 안에 자주 삼바 로 댐백이 랑게 대화 대 방신 자체와 랑다 현주주라 탈비 대화 중화 세라 안에 대화 충고대 대화 자면 당원 저식
Then, so such a steadfast bodhisattva who has this kind of stable mind is able then to abandon their own happiness and to see that doing that, abandoning, giving up their own happiness is actually the source for a vast amount of happiness up to and including even the happiness of liberation for themselves and for others as well, then they see that. And then in that way, then they give up small forms of happiness. It's appropriate for them to cast aside these minor, insignificant forms of happiness.
대체 되니다 가대 대단 미세나 대남 멤버 타기니 미신맨이 지제바 주주디네 때마이 가대 대화 첨부 텐도 대화 충우 대한 미세나 대화 첨부지 루비 체도 탑이 대화도 아니 루비 텐도 대화 충우 대한 미세나 대례 동아지 미세나 대니 내 시위 tendu member targets 랑게 내 시위 tendu 아니 member target 아니 매 미신바 카드 연결해서 매 미신비 매수 진바 쳐봐 용을 주나 아니 가서 매수 진바 쳐봐 용을 주나니 되니 당와리 봐 많이 배 안에 가서래 대화 침비 친도 안에 충우 안에 땅 있으래 충우 땅 거래 맞아 충우도 채매당 예수 따로 다 뒤진주고 지러와
Then verse 76 continues saying, if you cannot bear this, then healers and such who prescribe bitter medicine would disappear, and that makes no sense. Okay. Okay. So therefore, if for the sake of great happiness, for the sake of great bliss, you're not able to endure even a little bit less happiness, then it would be similar to someone who has an illness, and in order to alleviate that illness, to remove it, they go to a doctor, and the doctor gives them some kind of medicine which doesn't taste well. It's not flavorful. The doctor gives them that kind of medicine, and then when they take it, and then once the illness has diminished, has alleviated, they get angry at the doctor. Now that, of course, is irrational. It's completely irrational, and this is this is just like it's taught in the introduction to the Bodhisattva's way of life, that it's not appropriate to give up something great for the sake of something small. This is not the correct thing to do. One should not give up that which is great for the sake of something small.
오야 너버주와 강인데 라라케베 펜베통 현양 섬전 멘뱅고 아니 너버주와 강인바테 자주 섬베 제바제비 대소 라라케와 케베 펜베통에 자주 섬베 제비 대소 섬전 멘뱅고 너버주와데 아니 라라 캐베 아니 템바 통에 동아점 중사점지 된도 아니 랑게 대바 전부 냠발 미샤바
Then next verse, the first half of verse 77 says, where is it? The wise see that in some cases, what is usually harmful can be helpful. This is explained that, moreover, that which looks harmful from the perspective of inferior sentient beings, for those who are wise or intelligent and skilled, one could say skilled or intelligent, at the time when they're engaged in the practice of the bodhisattvas, they're able to see that is the benefit of it, and then therefore, for the sake of a small amount of suffering that they have to undergo in that practice, they don't cause the deterioration of the great bliss that they're out for.
Oh yeah, this one never do what can you la care pemba easy gana. Dunga junsa zamji, pena cedi lisala nebagi, ane dunga junsa zam sevi tendo, ane tabin dawa 첨보 주야기, ane dawa 첨보 지냐마 미샤와. right?
So it's the same thing, basically, the point here is that if one is wishing to achieve liberation, and then through the course of this life, you have to undergo some degree of hardship, some unpleasant circumstances. But if you're out for liberation, this is speaking in terms of the lesser vehicle kind of approach, then you would willingly undergo those minor difficulties during one's life so as to achieve the great bliss of liberation.
Oh yeah. That and Shua Nashi, Dunga Jusa Zamji, Dawa Chembo Yaba Mishana, Ona Dunga de Dunga Marive, Dunga Yinza Pawachava, Yure Sana. And then Dunga Jirashi Yibe, Tamjeto Bangore, Tedi Lisona Nebi Dunga Tiang, Dunga Yinza Pawachagore, starting to Jubachadina. Siesumi Lundanga Siena. Jidam miji sawata, tenju kunla rabdu sa. Jidam la dunga pangwa tang, ane dewa nyamsu lamja yinpa, jidam bare. Jidam teta yunmini. Da miksa la chanju semba kowa neba, rangshan kunla dewi jubashi ino. Chanju semba, ane kowa neba de, ane kowi Nowadays, Russian Gula Pampi Jubashi Yindang, Dunga Junga Tiang, and a Deva Gula Tokuare, Kora Nede, Ane or Dunga Junsa Junga Tiang, Ane Russian Gula Pampi Jubashi.
So the wise see that in some cases, what is usually, this is the second half, sorry. Second half of the verse 77 says, all treatises propose both general rules and exceptions. The meaning of this is that there are general cases and then there are special cases. Now, someone might say, well, since these things, these practices, hard practices that are done by the bodhisattvas, are of the nature of suffering, then they should be, or rather, let me start over on that. So someone might say, well, it says in the scriptures, scriptures that that which is of the nature of suffering is something that is entirely to be abandoned. That is said in the scriptures, that which is of the nature of suffering is to be entirely abandoned. And so what you're advocating here contradicts that statement in the scriptures. The reply to that is then given in the second half of verse 77, where it says that there are that all treatises actually express the general case as well as exceptions or specific exceptional cases. So here then, although it is generally the case that which is of the nature of suffering is indeed to be abandoned. In a specific case, here in reference to the bodhisattva remaining in samsara, this is something which is merely or solely the cause of happiness for both him or herself as well as for others. So the bodhisattva there is undergoing some kind of hardship and suffering, but they're doing so for the benefit of others, and this activity will actually serve as the cause of great happiness for both themselves and others.
Oh yeah, tenjo kun la rab tu nga se kana ane chir tang wa tang miksa ji nanga ji dang nang wa yue na ya miksa ge nanga la ga cha ye ge, 是吧？我的ane tenjo kun la nga be ji dang miksa ji tuen la kya wa cha ko se ji, 是吧？
So there in all of the treatises, there are general rules with respect to things which are allowed and prohibited, as well as exceptions in terms of those things which are allowed and prohibited. Therefore, all the treatises express these general rules as well as exceptions, and therefore one should be intelligent or skilled in being able to understand the meaning of what is the general case, a general rule, and what is the exception.
다 시와 티바 첨보라 가와를 바데 매번 말이 바 가와를 바데라 티바 첨보 가시래 년정원당 줘봐 군 세대 티바 첨비 되는 가시래 아니 다 가세 년지 원당 줘봐 군 세가나 자세 자주서 바그 줘봐 군 원도 아니 티바 첨비 릭사바 이제 전부 온도 땅와라 내 땅와 라야 아니 이용기 잡아 주베 대라양 아니 땅 맛이 내 땅용 내신 땅용 맛이 진짜 치소 다마 제이가나 이용기 잡아라 때네 아니 동화다 잔도그 잡아 니 전부 온도 땅 이제 전부 그 예수 라삼년제 되게 예수 아니 다 가서 공도 써봐 나신 전에 체도 잡아 삼제 탐적의 된도 라나무 바 양다바 조베 산제 요 공반 토바 되바기 안에 자세 장주기 셈 와 장주 셈비 장주기 셈당 셈 뒤에고네 안에 자세지 줘봐 친루라 줘봐 용수 줘봐 군 세가나 티바 친비 강시래 년제 저 군당 줘봐 군 세가 때 장주기 셈당 집이 된 장주기 셈당 아니 줘봐 타로를 쳐봐 주라 줘봐 용수 줘봐 군당 야
So then is explained why it is reasonable to take delight in the Mahayana. Verse 78, it says, the Mahayana says that all activities should be motivated by compassion. So here this is in the scriptures of the greater vehicle of the Mahayana. These explain that all of the practices of the bodhisattva are preceded by the great compassion, which is the wish that all sentient beings should be freed from suffering. And now when we mention compassion here, this is referring then to that great compassion which exists within the 6 factors for producing bodhicitta, and then the bodhicitta as the result, 7-fold cause and effect system of developing bodhicitta. So here, if one is doing this, one initially has to have one's Mahayana lineage awakened through developing admiration for the Mahayana. And then once that lineage within you is awakened, then you begin to develop bodhicitta through the different phases of recognizing all sentient beings as your mother, recalling their kindness, having the wish to repay their kindness, then developing affectionate love for them.
용의 참바 다 인지시 뭐라.
Then great compassion comes out of that. And then with that great compassion as a foundation, then you develop the higher intention, superior intention of wishing to liberate all sentient beings, the taking the responsibility to liberate all sentient beings from samsara. And then based on that, you develop the actual bodhicitta itself, which is the aspiration, the wish, desire to become a fully unexcelled, fully awakened Buddha, so as to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. And then once you've done that, then you engage in the practices as such, which are the 6 perfections of generosity and so forth. So these are taught in their entirety in the scriptures, scriptural collections of the Mahayana.
오야. 오 장주스비 저바 용수서와 꾸당 세대다. 아니 주비된 sem제당. 저바 8월에 침바 두당. 누용오 실라소비 아니 저바 지럽당. 돈이 도비 이시 처만 매바 세가나 아니 실락 니기. 지난당 상동 돈이 도비 아니 이시 처만 매바. 아 아니 저바를 셰베. 다 친구긴 하네. 저바 찔라당 차바 아니 파진 타만이야 롭주 저바를 셰베. 아니 셈단단 범 셈여바지이나 셈의 셰럽전식 이 셰럽전 수식 아니 다 대바침비 쳐라 매바 미래대 산제 아니 가서 나는 뭐 양다 본 저비 산제 요 코반 루베기 아니 다 갈소래 탑다 셰라 저바댐 봐.
So therefore, that being the case, then it continues saying, and wisdom will make them pure. And then the final line there is that what sensible person would condemn this? What sensible person would condemn this? So once one's developed bodhicitta and then starts to engage in the practices of the bodhisattva, starting with generosity, ethical conduct, forbearance, and so they start practicing the general practices of the bodhisattva. That is the first 4 of the 6 perfections, and starting with generosity. And then once they've begun that, then they start to develop shamatha as well as insight, the stabilizing meditation of shamatha, and then founded on that the insight meditation. And then with insight, one is able to develop the gnosis, which realizes which understands emptiness in a stainless fashion. It's stainless gnosis because it's arising out of that shamatha and insight, those 2. And so since this is explained in its entirety in the scriptural collections of the Mahayana, who that has a mind, that is, who has any kind of discernment or wisdom at all, would disparage that, and therefore it's inappropriate to condemn the Mahayana. This is...
다시 가서 된다면 아니 로바 셰베스 로바 저바 근데 저바 찔러당 파진 타만이라 로조서 로바 셰베 셈단 담바 수시 아니 특바시 못해라 매바 미리 그 말이 매바 미리데 아니 티jem 특바시 베드네 라나 매바 조베 자주 타바리 셰비 탑시 조바 땜베 탑시 조바 특바시 베드네 라 땜바레 티메지 되네라 마담바레 인자 팁시 가소레 대수로 조바 땡지 티메지 조바라 마담베체 매바 미리 부준제.
So here then, because these are explained in their entirety, they're completely in their entirety. That is the entirety of the general practices of the Bodhisattva, beginning with, how to develop bodhicitta and so forth, and then how to practice once one's developed bodhicitta in the sense of doing generosity, performing generosity, and the other first four perfections, and the other adjunct practices such as the attraction of disciples in the four ways. These other auxiliary practices are all taught in their entirety. And then likewise the method of achieving this stainless gnosis, which realizes emptiness out of shamatha and insight. They're explained in their entirety. Then who that has a mind, that is, who has any kind of intelligence, would disparage these, and thus it's inappropriate to condemn the scriptures of the Mahayana, which teach these things. That is, in the scriptures of the Mahayana, there we found that the entirety of the method for achieving unexcelled awakening, that is the state of a true, perfect, completely awakened Buddha, is explained in those scriptures, whereas in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana, these things are not expressed in their entirety.
Oh yeah, that did jela. No turn to what it was chimbola, never maybe Gunjan that turn to what they la. Shindu Jaji Rabsala, Dilutani Majambe. Say, Dashan Rana Mombai, Tena Tipachela, Anita, Shindu Jachi, Ani Rabsala, Tipachimbu, Deni, Ani Shindu Jachimbo, Georgia Jachimbo, or Georgia Sawa. 아니 디나게 아니 대바침베 저자 내루 사모동반지 대 라브도 사와 어 텐저기 내루 대 라브도 사모대다 퇴와 잠기 아니 동반이라 짜네 동반이라 동동나 아니 쳇다제 매바다와라 소바케 어 퇴와 잠기 짜네 아니 길루다니 마장와 세는 길루진 아니 아니 뭐야 티바침비 되네라 마장박 사랑하마기 아니 티바침비 되네 태와기 다자 매봐 텐지기 아니 길루진 뭐야 티바침비 바자 마샤비 되네라 마장박이 아니 티바침비 첼라매봐 고고와 대바지 온거래 장배 되네라 마장배 아니 티바침비 고wan 대바 쳇바 되네
Then, discouraged by its vastness and profundity, ignorant persons, due to their confusion, today condemn the Mahayana and thus become the foes of themselves, enemies of themselves and others. So here, some persons, when they hear the extremely vast practices of the Bodhisattva, and when they hear, just by hearing about the extreme profundity of the meaning of the way things are here referring to emptiness, the natural condition of things. Just by hearing that, they're terrified by it. They're frightened of it, and especially out of hearing the nature of the way things are, or about emptiness, they fall into a nihilistic view, thinking that this teaching entails the annihilation or the non-existence of things at all. Then out of that, they become discouraged, and then they themselves, because they don't have any prior training in the scriptural collections of the Mahayana, this means they don't have any propensities that they've acquired in previous lives from having trained and studied the scriptural collections of the Mahayana. Then they engage in, they deprecate or they deprecate the Mahayana. They deprecate it.
호야 데니다 가서래 자주선비 취업과 신도 자천보다 내루 사모나 퇴와 잠지 짜바 장겐 제왕에마라 티바치빌라 마장바기 아니 티바침발라 꾸안데바 군데 쳐반디 아니 나단 현지기 자 푸드 총하면 다이 첩 총하더래.
So these people that out of their fright that they get from hearing the extremely vast practices that the bodhisattvas undergo, and hearing the profundity, the depth of the meaning of the nature of reality, the way things are, they are terrified of this, and then they become discouraged at it. And because they themselves don't have any prior propensities for understanding it from having studied the Mahayana scriptures in their previous lives, then they engage in deprecation. They deprecate, they undervalue it, the Mahayana scriptural collections and the Mahayana itself. And then such persons are the ultimate enemies of both themselves and others.
oi 자푸드 총아래 된다비 다남 아노고한데 바제 자푸드 총아 임바 마셰바 텔라 몽바기 마리비 왕게 아니 다단 되나 아니 티바침볼라 아니 매밤 티바침볼라다 고한데 바제 용고아래 제도.
Then such enemies, these enemies who they're the ultimate highest enemy of self and others, out of their ignorance, their misunderstanding of the vast and profound nature of the Mahayana. They out of their confusion, such persons right now condemn the greater vehicle, the Mahayana.
Oh yeah, that didn't 예제라 다야게 니와 티바침비 되네 산제지 까주바 세가나 아니 가서래 년된데와 아마 가시기 아니 티바침보 산제지 까마인바 아니 가서래 무디바 가시기 제와 된데 명가에 와라 나 딘조라 티젠 까르 메데온 게 아니 란데 아마 딘조라 티바침보 까주베야 말에 년된데와 딘조와 인자 티바침보 되네 까주바라 아니 파진지 쪄봐 땜바 제 숨이 변하나 파진지 쪄봐 땜바 자주 준비 남 줘봐대 아니 시어거와 티바침보 되네라 되네 시어거와 산제지 집이 당이 아니 텔 가서래 텔에 줘봐시 시어거와 시어거와 아니 티바침보 되네 되네 시어거와 이제 티전 까주바 숨체
So next comes the establishment of the scriptural collections of the Mahayana as speech of the Buddha. In the past, and perhaps even today, there are members of schools of the Shravaka or the Hinayana who say that the Mahayana scriptures are not actually the speech of the Buddha. Then there are also some Tirthakas, non-Buddhist philosophers who attacked the Mahayana scriptures, and so this is next comes in a proof that the Mahayana scriptures are the actual speech of the Buddha, and this is done under three topics. First of all, teaching the practice of the perfections, demonstrating the practice of the perfections, showing that the entirety of the path of awakening needs to be understood from the scriptural collections of the Mahayana. And then likewise that one needs to in order to fully understand the greatness of the Buddha, in order to fully understand the greatness of the Buddha, one needs to understand this in its entirety as it's explained in the Mahayana scriptural collections. So by means of these three subjects, the Master Nagarjuna here proves that the Mahayana scriptural collections are the speech of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, that in it. 파진기 좁았단 되게 숨유비 나네 티진지 되네 그냥 가서 티바치비 되네 그냥 가서 아니다 네바시아바 로바시아바 준사자 매바 다테 대체바데라 네세 준사자 매바니 진다 추좀 서준지 삼대 셔럼 인진다 티제이나 티칠 어다 디기 가르송 거래서나 티쟁기 되네라 예셰지 측중사장 요 말에서 명확하래서 티쟁기 되네 그 교자들라 가르래서나 디라 예셰 지식이서 제일랭도와 티쟁기 되네라 예셰 네버시아바야 로바시아바 그 측중사장 요 말에서 명확하래서 티쟁기 되네 그 아니 교자들라 아니 짐바 아니 주름 써봐 준비 3대인데 딱 다시 공도 셔봐 나신 자리 아니 줘봐 바로 신주당 아니 주보도 공도 셔봐 진소 주보대 아니 자주 선배 줘봐 좀 면조대 삼바 자주 그 섬지 섬이 말씀라 라래봐 인장 줘봐된 섬제탕 그러 줘봐된 섬제 라나 바양다바 조베 장주 섬제바 대양 대원도 안에 이제 사삼년제 조고와 이제 대주 인제 단위 남 바티바시보길 되네 그 제중 어디래 와 대조바 티바 공도셰베 저자한테 조바를 안에 티바시베 되네래 숨비칠 세가나 티제이 가서 진다 주좀 저준제 3대 셔런 인제다 티제이나 티실 주비된 섬지 제바 파로도 침바 땡 이미 섬지 그 주인제 침바라 사와자 티바 침바기 아니 어떤 조바 아주 티진 그 되네라 샤바 티치나 안에 티바 침베 되네라 니셰 로샤 준세장 요 말이
So then, this is first comes a explanation that that there's not even the slightest fault within the scriptural collections of the Mahayana. The scriptural collections of the Mahayana do not possess even the slightest fault. And this is given in verse 80, where it says, the nature of what the Mahayana maintains is giving, ethics, tolerance, heroic effort, meditation, wisdom, and compassion. How could it contain a wrong statement? Then the commentary explains this, that within this scriptural collection of the Mahayana, how could there, what sort of badly spoken word is there? Or what sort of an explanation which is faulty or done in the improper sort of manner? There is not even the slightest such badly spoken word or faulty explanation within the scriptural collection of the Mahayana. And the reason that is given to prove this claim is that in the scriptural collection of the Mahayana, the Buddha has taught generosity, ethical conduct, patience, effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom. That is the 6 perfections that are practiced by bodhisattvas. And then likewise, as a foundation for the bodhisattva practices, the Buddha has taught the generation of bodhicitta, the generation of the mind that is the desire to achieve perfect awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. And likewise, the Buddha has taught the cause of that, which is the cause of that bodhicitta, which is great compassion, together with the superior intention. So all of these things are taught in their entirety in the scriptural collections of the Mahayana, and therefore there's not even the slightest fault within those scriptural collections of the Mahayana.
Oh yeah, that is oh tibachibi ten, ane ten kondo shabi, oh jinso chudang, jibi den senje la sowa, ante da tim ane teaching with la temba de sumbina, tibachibi ten tela temba ni. Chudum jimbe shenju de, zunju sebe dani ji, samden shera tabi ju, teaching tenin duwa yin, oh that digi 가르sunguare sana 아니 지소 대자기 라라기 라체 소소 줘야 아니 라체 소소 완도 채나 아니 가르 주고 아래 sana 아니 가서 농제 달을 표준 처와다 코선 가서 코선 표준 온도 다세지와다 어디 깨나라 간제다 가상야 시와 나시에 자니 라시에 소스 왕도 제나 수름단 진배 온디리 주그레 가상아 시와 임바지 수르는 넘버 답이 있어 아니 뭐람 처마메베 참자 진소 파진 주그 조체 사나시 제니 수름단 진배 온디리 당 롱제 주배 세야디 longe tang le pisum tsawa da khonzong khonzo tsawa ondo tang said that this one sujum dang jinbe undi le da longe tube nergab ji shenji tendang da tambo jinbe khod du dene ane sujum sung wala ko ro nergab ku tyen che de nergab shenji tendang junji dang sebe 내가 라텐데 단위 지탄 주바탕 다 삼된다 셔람 얘기 삼된다 셔람 얘기사 진주 세배 단위지 최중 진배 현주의 진주 세배 단위지 세타의 대송아 진주다 세배 내가 라텐데 단위 지탄 주바탕 차와대단데 대 세바라 강아지 동아 단위지 세바탕 차와대 주바라 메조비 진주 잠바 니기 단위 지탄 주바탕 다 삼된당 셔람 니지 아니 최양답인 도래 semnyamba yanda ba chida wa chi de shewa juro se gala ani sinela tene ani toni do bi shera sangdong je ro toni do bi shera sangdong je wala tene ani shera ko ma khone khondo pede tar ani tabalana tarbi ko ma toba jinjang oti samden shera tabi ju teje dini duwa yin se oda ta to sungu ana dibatu juda ya ro.
So next shows how it is that the objectives of the Mahayana are taught in those scriptural collections. And this is verse 81. Others' aims are achieved through giving and morality or ethical conduct. One's own aims are achieved through tolerance or forbearance and effort, heroic effort. Meditation and wisdom lead to liberation. This summarizes the Mahayana teachings. So if we examine these different practices, ethical conduct, generosity, effort, forbearance, meditative concentration, and wisdom, these things function as the cause of liberation, or they're broken into different sets, and they operate so as to produce either the aims of others or one's own aims. And if we examine them in accordance with their individual outcomes, we would say that ethical conduct and generosity function so as to produce a body or a rebirth in a high state of existence, a high status kind of a body and life. And likewise, the generosity and ethical conduct function to produce the things that we enjoy and we utilize when we're born into a high status form of life. Then, in terms of the nekab jingi
내가 현지团당 아니 진주당随便 된다디 진바당 출림기 원디 류당 농제 주배 내가 그 내가 현지团당
nekab kishin.
진주당随便 내가 라때나 단위지团주바당
Because once you've achieved that kind of high status of life, and you have all of the wealth or whatever you need in that condition, then you're actually in a position to be able to accomplish the sort of temporary sorts of objectives or goals of others. What this means is that once you've achieved a high status life with wealth and so forth, then you can attract other people by means of that, and you can provide them with whatever necessities, whatever they require. So you're in a position to do that. So you're able to accomplish the aims of others, the temporary aims of others, as a result or an outcome of your development of meditative, ethical conduct and generosity. Then the practice of forbearance, as well as, the practice of effort and forbearance from the temporary perspective enables you to achieve your own aims. You can accomplish your own aims, meaning that when you have effort and you have forbearance, able to endure any kind of hardship that comes your way, then whatever sort of temporary objective you have, you'll be able to accomplish it. That's a second set of two. And then by means of the final set of two, meditative concentration and wisdom, this is explained in the sutra which is called the Summary of the Dharma, Dharma Sangraha Sutra, the sutra that is a summation of the Dharma. And it says that if one's mind is set in meditative equipoise, you'll come to know things just as they are. What that refers to then is when the mind is set in meditative equipoise, you will come to know things just as they are. That refers to the development of shamatha, and then once you have shamatha, that kind of mind stabilization of mind, single-pointed meditative concentration, that sort of stability of mind, then with that as a basis, you can develop the insight which investigates the nature of reality, and then the fruition of that kind of investigation with insight is the realization of emptiness. So those two arise out of, or rather that out of that, those two, meditative concentration and wisdom, those become the cause of liberation.
오야 가서래 타비주 예배 또나 짐발라서요 바로도 침바 주보테 티바 침비 되네기 아니 되네기 되니 뉴바레스 파진소 파진 주나 뒤 된소나 아니 티바 침비 된소나 대된비 측소나 티젠지 측소나 줘 그래
So then, since that's the case, that is the cause of liberation, then these 6 perfections that have been listed in the verse, these are the in brief, or summarize the intention, the objectives of summarize the objectives of the scriptural collections of the Mahayana. And if one holds those objectives, that is, when one holds them oneself, then one is a person who is holding preserving the objectives of the Mahayana. And if you preserve and hold the words which teach those objectives, then you're at that time you're preserving and maintaining the words of the Mahayana.
Oh yeah, that 되게 제 전에 that 되나 티바치비 되네 산제지 까를 주방을 되라 안에 다 돼서 다당시 나당 현변 탈비된 도나 산제 된 대다 바로 친구 코너에 대외딘이 산제가 다당 현변 탈비된 세가라 다당 현라 편배주 아니 내 편배주 내가 그 편배된다 타도 그된 탈비된 너 뒤네 다 디바심 대면기 내내기 톱자 타도 아니 가소래 랑기 안에 타바 가소래 타바 톱제가 탈때봐 라 탈비된 너 뒤네 대면기 내내래 아니 산제기 땜바 산제기 땜바 대다 대면기 내내라 대면기 타도게 타바 주제기 람 산제기 땜바 대다니 다다 현라 편비지 또나 산제 땜바 산제 땜 대다 어디기 여바 태나시 아니 티바 침비 되네라 소비 바로 그 침비 주기 코나 화단 제와 대면기 되네 그 된대다 대전 그 되네라 소비 파준 주기 코나 화단 제와 뒤네 예배 대회 아니 티바시비 되네니 산제지가 인방야와 너바 차오
Then comes by means of the arguments that have been presented above, the demonstration or proof that these scriptural collections of the Mahayana themselves are the speech of the Buddha. And this is given in verse 82. In brief, the teaching of the Buddha includes what benefits oneself and others and the way to attain liberation. These topics are contained in the six perfections. Therefore, that is the six perfections, are also, or the Mahayana teachings, are also the Buddha's words, or are the Buddha's words. Doesn't say also. So here it says then, the commentary explains that the causes of benefiting both oneself and others, the causes of both benefit for oneself and others, both in the temporary sense as well as in the sense of the objective of liberation, are in brief, taught in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana. The Buddha has taught those things in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana. That is, the causes of temporary benefit for self and others, that is, such as rebirth in a high state of existence, the achievement of high status, and then likewise the meaning of liberation is taught in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana, in brief, by the Buddha. Now, however, these things themselves are contained within the six perfections, which are taught in the scriptural collections of the Mahayana. And not only that, there are additional things which are taught within the Mahayana, which are not found in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana. But since all of the teachings that one finds in the briefly demonstrated in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana are found within the scriptural collections of the Mahayana, therefore one must definitely accept that these scriptural collections of the Mahayana, in total, the scriptural collection of the Mahayana, is the speech of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, 대전 가르메도가 다진 쉬와 나신 전에 안에 연대되와 아마 가시게 간절해서나 덴바통에 조주지 돈이 통에 지시차 아니 주주시라 레고가 수치받지 제가 나신신 덴바통에 지시 조회 통에 조주지 돈이 통에 지시차 덴바세에 대시那个单位的他就空头下把那些人家特别在意嘛都，俺那东半什么东半年嘛下把钱，我现在两把汤圆抽就去，当年汤圆继续吃是，现在考完了抽吧，他把拖把了东半年多过嘛的，我，俺那卡的人生呢，电信为什么就汤嘛多少恐怕吃完了但呢，俺那搞出来，啊，他把。So
this entire discussion is based upon the fact that some members of the Shravaka tradition, people who belong to schools that follow the Shravaka Yana, some of these people rejected emptiness. They rejected the Buddha's teaching of emptiness. And this is found or referred to, for example, in the introduction to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where there's a verse which says that if one is liberated by seeing the truth here refers to the Four Noble Truths, then what is the point of emptiness? That idea that what use is this teaching on emptiness if one can achieve liberation by means of seeing the Four Noble Truths? So some of these people thought that the teaching of their understanding of the Four Noble Truths is based on the idea that the only kind of selflessness that is relevant to the achievement of liberation is the understanding that the person does not have a self, which is a self-sufficient substance. So they feel that, or they believe that through that kind of understanding of selflessness and their interpretation of the Four Noble Truths based on that interpretation of selflessness is sufficient, and then they feel that the teaching on emptiness is not valid, and thus some of them have rejected it, and therefore this exposition here is designed to demonstrate that the teachings of the six perfections and the teachings on emptiness are in fact the words, the speech of the Buddha.
我真正印象，狂都写法给提前各种给那个，俺那狂了戳吧拖吧戳吧拖吧了，俺那多年多吧个吧写吧，他去那个，俺那年头就啥了老把对吧？就写了就爬到起码老把的敲前呢，俺那狂了戳吧拖吧，年头给老了点了狂了戳吧拖吧了，俺那写了就爬到起码老把的敲前呢，俺那写信给多有告诉送吧的。 写信人多的三节就干嘛的？你送啊，这写信给多的三节就干嘛的？啊，我印章，但写信给多的三节就干中国啊，把印章写信给多的三节就干嘛的？印章当你多过干嘛的？写信给多的三节就干，当你多过话是的，多的写信给多的三节就干嘛的？那个的。
So some of these people, these followers of some of the Shravaka schools, who follow one interpretation or one idea about the lesser vehicle, they think that in order to achieve liberation, one doesn't need to understand emptiness. Rather, one simply needs to understand the idea of selflessness, as we mentioned. So for these people, when they hear the statement in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, that as we mentioned earlier, there's a statement which says that those who wish to train themselves on the level of the Shravaka type of practitioner, must practice must engage in the practice of the perfection of wisdom. They hear that kind of statement and they say, well, that's not the word of the Buddha, so it's not, they reject those statements and say that such statements are not, in fact, the words of the speech of the Buddha, and make that kind of rejection.
Oh yeah, that didn't take Sanjaka Mare say Gana, and you catch a teacher Majuna, Churchikan, Chitatu. Teaching Sanjaka Matu Mayina, and a Timenji doing the Sanjaka, but the Tutukumare Sungare.
However, one can reply to them by saying, if you say that it's impossible to establish or prove that the scriptures or the teachings found in the Mahayana are not, it's impossible to prove that those are the speech of the Buddha, then the same thing would apply to you. That is, if there's no way to establish that the Mahayana sutras and so forth, the scriptures of the Mahayana are the speech of the Buddha, then it would equally apply to your position, and there would be no way to establish that the scriptures that are found in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana are the speech of the Buddha either.
가데디제 마드다 체질루니 기타주 아니 담보철란 디미주健康肯尼 태이시 디니 티젠 라양 추 아니 티멘지 되네 산제지 까임바디 아니 저랑 가르스 주고도 토마네 저랑라 티멘지 되네 산제지 까이바 추바지 요 말레스 健康rel라 때네 아니 티젠 그 티멘지 되네 산제지 까임바디 주고도가 주종아스 오 텐라와데 아니 티바신비 되네 대양 아니 오 텐나신전에 저랑라 충고래
So what happens then is that if these people are rejecting the Mahayana scriptures as being the words of the Buddha, then one can ask them, what sort of evidence or what sort of conditions do you have that enable you to establish that the Hinayana scripture, the scriptures that are found in the collections of the Shravaka schools and so forth, the scriptures that are held by those who follow the Hinayana and the Shravaka approach, what evidence or what basis do you have for establishing your scriptures as the speech of the Buddha? And when one presents this kind of question to them, it's quite clear that they don't have any means to establish their own scriptures as the words of the Buddha.
Oh, that did. 리바 담보되던 네 집바체 아니 가서래 유인해가다 탑이든 너뒤바 팀명이든 산재지가 임바 세대 아니 체랑라 간데지 추송 대주바 나신 게 갈라되는 추송 대나신 아니 티지 티바치베 까대야 두그래 세 나중에 주바 나체체 나다 현라 펜비 유인해가 내가 탑이든 너뒤바 팀명이 되네라 땜바데 팀명이 되네 산제지 까임바데 천하라 간데스 주소 대주바나시 특전라야디 충그레 직체.
So one reason that this argument is proof is because here, as we've just said, the teachings that one finds in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana schools are all found within the Mahayana scriptures. That is, you don't find any teachings in the Hinayana scriptures that are not found within the Mahayana scriptures.
오래 드려야 티세 산제지가 말이 티바침베 산제지가 마임바 가래래서나 티바침보제 산제지가 이메라 아니 저바다 자와래. 그러와 저바다 자와래. 세가 임바라 티진 저제 칠세나. 提前就十八千部的三节就干嘛的？三节就干一面了，这把它讲完了。推荐这家去先呐。
But then they might come back and say, well, our scriptural collection is generally accepted as the words of the Buddha, whereas your scriptural collections, the Mahayana scriptures, are subject to argument. They're debatable.
对了，崇拜对了，我那天面就干样三节就干嘛的？俺那目的不当，俺那做把它讲完的是，农来目的不当，农先谈狼样让先当。这些引起团结出入是的，他天面就干他三节就干嘛用吧？目的把他这把结为，俺的这把他结完印章，俺的三节就干用吧，透过过来。
So then one can reply to them and saying, well, your scriptures are rejected by non-Buddhists. That is, the Tirthakas don't accept your scriptures as legitimate, authentic. Therefore, if being subject to argument was a sufficient criterion to establish that something is not the speech of the Buddha, then your scriptures would fall under the same category, and thus you yourselves could not establish them as the teachings of the Buddha.
Oh yeah, that didn't get ba. That the ma junju ke share lu ka so. Ane teaching ka du ke ba de ma do se ai ba.
And then these kinds of reasonings are given in the 9th chapter of the Introduction to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, in which one finds a similar or a related demonstration that the Mahayana scriptures are the speech of the Buddha.
Oh, then car meeting guy de ane thiba chembo de sanje nyangalan de jesu ane mude bang gashi ki ane tu 쇠바 레체니 아니 동가 요와 인자 딜라 아니 가소레 알루 마데 현주지 주요 많이 주바인 너데 gen 가소 아니 대전 가 주베 그 바텔라 알루 마데 현주지 주요 많이 아니 대전 가 많이 봐 안지 산자 양알렌 대위 제수 아니 모두 받아 써와 된지기 안에 티바 첨부 아니 된지지 특대 나샤 제바지 이나 점된 대기 아 롱된 거 원래 롱마된 비쳐 아 롱마된
So then some people have said actually that the Mahayana scriptures are not the actual teachings of the Buddha. Rather, they were created or invented after the Buddha Shakyamuni passed into nirvana. After Buddha Shakyamuni passed into nirvana, they say, then subsequently some Tirthakas, that is non-Buddhists, fabricated the Mahayana scriptures and falsely asserted that these were the speech of the Buddha. But this is not the case, and the evidence that can be adduced for that is that if that had been the case, then one would find in the Hinayana scriptures prophecies where Buddha Shakyamuni would have said that in the future people will fabricate my speech and produce this Mahayana tradition that some of the Shravakayana followers of some of the Shravaka schools say is the case with the Mahayana.
Oh, 아니 다 대바 첨부 산제지 샤슈 산제 양알렌 대비 제수 아니 모두 받은 데르기 차와들을 많이 봐. 대바 첨부 그때는 뒤냠도 중화지 인바인장 대전 대바 첨부 때는 뒤냠도 중화지 인장 알로 마된 현직 중 스테이버레 현직도 중화 아니 점점 양알렌 대비 제수 아니 대바 첨부 때는 생기 차와 많이 봐. 안에 산재지가 팀면지 때문에 추바당 뒤냠도 안에 추바.
So the reason, another reason for not accepting that line of argument that some of these people have put forward is that one can show that it's the case that the scriptural collections of the Mahayana arose or were produced at the same time as the scriptural collections of the Hinayana.
예. 되네 현재 중화이나 안에 뒤에 그 내가지 안에 샤르부나 뭔가지 보라 소와게 안에 년대 친구 대다 그냥 안에 주요도 죽으러 와 대다 그 안에 대다를 땡고 그래 쓰나 안에 주요 많이 대다 그 무슨 그 주요 말에 말로 말된 현재 중 주요 많이
And then then they come back to that argument and say, well, how is it that it was if that is the case, that the Mahayana scriptural collection arose at the same time as the Hinayana scriptural collection, then why was it not taught to the great elders that existed at the time of Lord Buddha, that is, elders such as Maughalyayana and Shariputra, they did not receive the Mahayana. Now, the reason for that is that those elders at that time, in that way, were not the recipients. They were not, or the Mahayana teachings were not within the domain of that which was to be taught, which was taught for the great elders.
야, 다 된대 그바 가셔 요가 당 어때요? 주요 많이 있어. 견주 가서라. 아까 예수 전보라 소배 등보 민주와 세대. 다들 주요 많이 세대 지바래. 예수 전보라 소바 그 도바 민주와.
So then there's additional reasoning that's given that we find in the introduction to the Bodhisattva's way of life, such as, again, that reason that these Mahayana teachings were not sort of within the range of the great elders Maughalyayana and Shariputra, and additional reasons are given as well.
야, 대인다 대전 가도 대 책도 뉴뉴지를 문도대 아니 진주 그 샤를 레고 아니 도대장기 레고니와 대전 가도 그 레고 아니 또그 봐봐 나서와 다 대전 가도 그 봐 망보여야 돼.
So there's here in this text, there's merely a brief presentation of the arguments which establish the Mahayana as the speech of the Buddha. But these are treated much more extensively in the wisdom chapter of the introduction to the Bodhisattva's way of life. Likewise, in the second chapter of the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras. And then there's the blaze of reasoning also treats this subject as well. Now, within the Shravaka schools, some accept that the Mahayana scriptures are the words of the Buddha, and then some of them do not. There's division among the people who belong to Shravaka schools.
Oh yeah, that did tend to say. Then you were Chanju Chumbi Lam Terran, Zoba Shio Govanis. That Chanju Chumbo Lanam Bayanda was over Sanjaji, Ani Kombang, Ani Tibachi Bitani Latana, Zoba Shio Govani. Chanju Lamje Sonam Da, Yishi Ranshin Sanjaji. 一些人信三界记，看了点比推荐的密些当然密些头，写的那看的中国人现在那没比长久记那么全部，那看上看一说那些以前的苏古主这个，你就算那么当，算那么去错当，秋古主这个就那一些去错记人性，是吧？我这个的。咱现在了，三界南界算那么大，一些人性是有一些些人性，三界级强求生比，三界级生比强求生比，等你了看，等你看了点把的，啊，我们等你看了点把是等你的了，安尼我们等你，对等你，到底等你，安尼我是什么也别拿呢，他把出征去老啊点把。 对的呢，他把定个自己老啊，我等去做我去吧，对的呢，他把写了自己老啊，等去做我去吧， 아니 원배 되네 오 된다위다 원배 되네라 이식 초당 어디 되네라야 이식 초당 나 저데 아니 누이 되네 그 나라 사람 그 초당 이제다 산주선배 되네 강라 때비 티바 전부대 손예지 라신 예와 미셰바 티바 전부기 안에 장주 루지기 손예지 라신 예와 미셰베 동범 미동범 미동바 데 미세도 송임바레 미셰베 미동바데 미세도
Then it shows that why it is necessary to understand the entirety, or in its entirety, the Bodhisattva's path, the highway of the Bodhisattvas from that is from the scriptural collections of the Mahayana. This verse 83 explains that. Those blinded by ignorance cannot tolerate the Mahayana, in which the Buddhas taught the great path, or the highway, consisting of merit and wisdom, merit and gnosis, that leads to awakening. So here it says that this great path, or one could translate that as the highway to awakening, the highway to unexcelled perfect awakening, which has as its nature the two collections, the collection of merit and the collection of gnosis. This is expressed in the scriptural collections of the Bodhisattvas, Bodhisattva scriptural collections. The Bodhisattva, they're called Bodhisattva Pitaka. Pitaka means like a scriptural collection, and there's three of them. There's the collection of ethical conduct, Vinaya, or especially monastic discipline, or the discipline that is to be observed in the performance of ethical conduct. Then there's the scriptural collection of the sutras, and then there's the scriptural collection of the Abhidharma, or higher philosophical analysis and metaphysics, topics like that. And then, so in those three collections pertain to different aspects of the two collections. That is, the collection of merit specifically derives, or is especially comes out of the teachings that are found in the scriptural collection that pertains to discipline, the practice of ethical conduct. And then one finds that as well in the sutra collections. The collections of the Mahayana Sutras have teachings that pertain to the development of merit. And then, but the sutra collection also has teachings which pertain to the aspects of the path that give rise to the development of the collection of gnosis. And then with regard to the last of the three collections, Abhidharma, or the metaphysics or philosophical studies, one could translate that. That is especially related to the development of the collection of gnosis. And so those